Thanks very much, Trevor, for the introduction. I'd like to thank the college for inviting me to speak this evening. So this evening I'm going to be speaking about disposable vapes, a public health and environmental emergency. So as Trevor alluded to, the faculty of paediatrics through the college has just published a paper on disposable vapes calling for the outright ban of these in Ireland. And what I'm going to do today is kind of just go through that paper in a bit of detail and about the rationale why we're asking for this ban. So what are disposable vapes? And I'll start by talking about that, why they become so popular. And then I'm going to talk about the health and environmental impacts of vaping. And then what we recommend should happen next. So what are disposable vapes? Just to clarify, when I talk about vapes, we're talking about e-cigarettes. And the type we're talking about today are single-use only or non-rechargeable types. So we're not talking about the ones that you can reuse again and again and again. Typically, disposable vapes contain an e-liquid cartridge, a plastic, copper wiring, and a lithium battery. And what's in the e-liquid? Generally, most e-cigarettes contain nicotine. The EU regulations say that they should be at a maximum dose of about 20 milligrams per ml. They also contain a range of flavouring and propylene glycol as well. So when e-cigarettes first come on the scene, they were purported to be developed as a quitting aid, but unfortunately, the conversation has moved in a completely different direction. And I'm going to talk about kind of why that might be the case. In our paper, we've reported that vaping has been increasingly used by adolescents and young adults. In the most recent Healthy Ireland survey that was published last year, 11% of under 25s are now vaping either occasionally or on a daily basis. If you look at the SPAD survey from 2019, about 4 in 10 16-year-olds have tried vapes and 15% currently use them. Now, that's 2019 data and last year's data, and the SPAD survey for 2023 is about to be published, so I'll be very interested to see what the updated stats are, but we expect them to be a lot more. We don't have a breakdown of exactly the types of vapes that we use here in Ireland, but we know that from data from the UK and Northern Ireland, there's been an explosion in the use of disposable vapes since 2021, since they came on the scene. For instance, in Scotland, their use increased in the space of 12 months by 14-fold, from 1.2 to 16.7%, and that's amongst vapers of any age. But interestingly, the ASH UK survey noted a 9-fold increase over the space of 2 years in teenagers. And that's an area which is obviously going to be the focus of some of my talk today. So why has vaping become so popular? I suppose if you're going to talk about vaping, we probably need to go backwards and think about it was developed as a quit smoking tool. So in about 2013, there was a large investment from tobacco companies into e-cigarette companies. At that stage, the e-cigarette market across the world was worth about 3 billion. In 2022, it's now worth over 20 billion. And now these companies are developing their own e-cigarette brands and disposable vapes themselves, many of them. A lot of them have e-cigarette companies, some of them have up to 30% investment from the big tobacco companies. But before even that starts, we have to think about what big tobacco used to do in the 40s, 50s and 60s. And I'm going to start by talking about this man here, Ernest Dieter. He was the father of motivational research, and he was a very clever psychoanalyst who adapted his skills in psychology and psychoanalysis to the world of marketing. So if you remember Mad Men, and if anyone's ever watched that show, this was the guy in the corner that came to the advertising people who came up with the ideas about how to sell products to people. And he was a very active person in the realm of tobacco advertising. And what he came to learn through his research was that rather than asking smokers directly why they smoked, by asking indirect questions and through focus groups and talking to smaller groups of people, you find out much more hidden, desires and more, much more a wealth of information about why people smoked. And I suppose he published this through this book, The Strategy of Desire. And, it was a very powerful marketing strategy. In the 1950s, about 50% of adult males smoked. So it was an extremely successful strategy. We all have heard about the doctors in their 40s and 50s. They used to promote, they used to be used as an advertising tool. And this was a strategy for the tobacco companies to say that, well, it's okay for your doctor to smoke, so it's okay for it's okay for you to smoke. But actually, Dieter came along and he brought it to a whole different level of tapping into people's inner desires, and actually not only talking about the doctor that it's okay to smoke, but actually using it, giving people permission to smoke guilt-free. And he uses this as a very strong concept, taking away the guilt of smoking, and making a desirable pastime. Further onto that, a great book was published about 10 years ago called The Merchants of Doubt. So we now have a marketing strategy which promotes smoking as a desirable pastime, and trying to take away the guilt. What they then did was a lot of doctors took money from the tobacco industry to promote the idea that smoking wasn't harmful for people's health. And one of the interesting people was Hans Zayek, who hypothesized that actually it was the guilt and the stress that caused cancer rather than the actual smoking. And these were the people who are at the book, and I love this term, the merchants of doubt. So what we have here is a tobacco industry that created a desirable product and created doubt throughout the years, until this was all revealed that actually smoking was very harmful and came about. And that has repercussions for climate change and I'll move on to vaping. But in regards to climate change, what we have here is, it's desirable to have, big cars, desirable to have fast food, it's marketed towards us. But also as well, we have people, anti-climate change people who are presenting non-scientific information out there in the media, and that's not helping the process as well. So bring that back to vaping. What we have here now is a whole range of social media influencers who are promoting vaping throughout TikTok and on all the other channels. And these are the merchants of doubt, as you would nowadays. We also have about 20,000 flavours available on the market, so making this product extremely attractive and desirable for teenagers and youth. And then point-of-display shops. So anyone who walks into a petrol station will see this in Ireland. Will see this somewhere behind the counter or in front of the counter. So these are products that are on display. They're colourful, they're flavoured, and they're attractive to young people. So why are we worried about vaping? Well, first thing to say is, are they harmful? One of the factoids that I always like to talk about when I hear, when people ask me, are e-cigarettes harmful, is that you hear a lot of the e-cigarette companies purporting the statement that e-cigarettes are about 95% less harmful than cigarettes. This statement is completely false and was based on a paper back in 2013 that was non-scientific and was opinion-based, no evidence whatsoever. And somehow Public Health England and the vaping marketing people are tagging on to this. Nobody is saying that e-cigarettes are as harmful as tobacco. That's absolutely true. But it's not true also to say that it's 95% less harmful. Yes, they are less harmful, but they are harmful products. And how are they harmful? Well, they can damage your lungs. They can cause asthma attacks. They can cause chronic bronchitis symptoms like cough. You're 3 to 5 times more likely to smoke if you vape as a teenager. You obviously teenagers who vape have addiction. They have anxiety. They can have cognitive problems, and they can have trouble sleeping when they're addicted to nicotine. Your exposure to potentially harmful chemicals as a respiratory physician, we're obviously very concerned. The long-term impact of that, what's that going to do to your lungs? It's postulated that may cause COPD in the future, possible link to gum disease, and then obviously there's all these unknown factors as well. So let's just put that to bed. There's no doubt that vaping is harmful, but yes, they're not as harmful as tobacco products. But why is it more dangerous for kids? So adolescent lungs and brains are much more vulnerable to the toxic effects of vaping. And obviously the earlier people start vaping, the more chance you are going to have long-term damage. As I mentioned as well, it's more likely to lead to tobacco smoking down the track. What about the environmental impact? So these disposable vapes, again, we're talking about the non-rechargeable single-use ones. They're difficult to dismantle. They're less likely to be appropriately recycled. And the actual recycling process is quite intensive and labour intensive. They're single-use plastics, so that contributes to the land and marine pollution. There's lithium batteries in these, so there's a fire risk if they're not properly discarded. And then the e-liquid can leach into the environment and harm the wildlife. But is there any evidence that this is happening? Again, looking toward the UK, 50% of disposable vapes are thrown away without any recycling. That's equivalent to approximately 1.3 million disposable vapes per week, which accounts for about 22 football pitches. The lithium batteries that are thrown away each year in the UK amounts to 10 tonnes of lithium, and that's approximately 1,200 electrical vehicle batteries. This is immense waste that doesn't need to happen. What needs to happen though? So it goes back to the themes that I spoke about, desire and doubt. So what we need to do is remove the desire from people to start and continue to vape. So how do we do that? By putting a ban on disposable vapes, it will allow smokers to continue to use rechargeable devices if they want to use e-cigarettes to quit. It will prevent the teenage using their product of choice, which it clearly is now. And there's no doubt about that the evidence shows that teenagers are using disposable vapes far more than any other product out in the market. Also, a ban on disposable vapes, or a ban on flavours, apart from tobacco flavour, is recommended because that's also attracting the youth to the market. We'll also recommend, obviously, the marketing and advertising of these products is significantly regulated, both online and, at point of sale, in the shop fronts. We would also recommend that for protecting children and, promoting, a healthy lifestyle, we should be raising the age of sale of tobacco products, both tobacco products and vaping, from 18 to 21. Lastly, doctors really should be, there to advise and also ask about vaping, because it's not commonly new. I mean, I in my own practice, I often ask teenagers now, do they vape, especially our asthmatics who come to our clinic, and really giving them advice about how harmful it is for their lungs going forward. We also need to build on education for children, and there is a very good curriculum in the junior cycle, but it needs to be, built on, and more investment needs to be brought into that. And lastly, the HSE really needs to fund a mass media campaign to highlight the dangers of vaping and to prevent this from the targeting of youth and the marketing that's happening. Thanks very much.